Hi everyone, welcome back to 33 Founders. I'm so excited you're with us today because I'm here with Justin Miller, the co-founder of WedPics. Thanks so much for being with me, Justin.
Thanks for having me.
So let's dive right in. Your Twitter bio states that you're an overuser of emojis. So we're going to start out with your top 3 favorite emojis.
The number one favorite emoji is the crying face without the tears, like that face. Okay. I like the big eye face.
Oh, and that's my favorite one.
Yeah, that's a good one. And then I also really like the face that's laughing with the 2 tears coming out. Those are my top 3. I actually have a group of friends, and we do a weekly check-in where everyone takes a screenshot of their most recent used emojis and sends it out. So we kind of get a sense of what everybody's doing at that moment.
Then what a great way to do it. I have to say there's high stakes for that question, and you did well. I'm sorry there's no taco one.
You know, it is unbelievable that doesn't exist. And I oftentimes have people tweet to me or email me or text me like that there's a rumor that that's going to come out, but it has yet to show up.
There are some things that I would never ever use, and then like the things that I naturally need are not there.
Yeah. Some of them make absolutely no sense, but apparently in some other parts of the world, I guess they do make sense. I don't know. I stick to like the front half of the emoji list.
I do too. So emojis aside, I'm really excited for you to introduce us to WedPics because you have an amazing story and product. So let's start with that.
Yeah. So I will preface the story by saying I am a 34-year-old single guy who has found myself leading a wedding company. I can honestly tell you that couldn't be farther from what I envisioned myself doing as a child, but here I am, and it's a cool story as to how we got here as a team. Back in 2010, I was working for a big corporation. I was getting really antsy with what I was doing. I needed a change. I decided I wanted to become an entrepreneur, something I knew nothing about. I was very intrigued by mobile phones at that time. I was, in fact, one of those nerds that stood outside of the Apple store when the first iPhone came out. I did not camp out. However, I did wait and spend several hours of my life standing in that line to get the phone. And so I was very intrigued from an early age with the capability of mobile apps. And in 2010, I found myself at a concert here locally in North Carolina. And being that I'm a bigger guy, when I go to shows, I typically stand in the back, just as to not create the human wall in front of everybody else. And I'm watching everyone in front of me holding their phones in the air, capturing these photos and videos of this really awesome show. And then I started thinking that I would never see any of that again because I didn't know any of these people except for the few that were with me. Keep in mind, this is pre-hashtag days, pre-Instagram days. So there wasn't really a way to aggregate or to collect any of that data that was being captured. So originally, the idea spawned around concerts or events like that, where you have hundreds, if not thousands, of people that are all capturing their own candid content, and figuring out a solution for, in my mind, the problem, which was aggregating or collecting all of that. So we set out with this original idea, which was an app called Deja Me. And that app, we were trying to get into the concert space, the festival space, really enable users to experience these events through all of these different and unique perspectives. While in theory it sounds interesting, and oftentimes even today people still say, oh yeah, that's a cool idea, that'd be a lot of fun. At the end of the day, it doesn't work because it creates a solution with no problem. People don't really care that much about seeing everybody else's perspective of the same show. people like their little circles of being able to post to their followers and have their followers who wait for them to post to be able to interact with that content. People don't really care about strangers glancing at what they felt that experience was like. So the problem we faced was that we had created a solution to a problem that didn't exist, and we're trying to create a problem because of the solution. This was in 2011, moving towards the latter part of 2011. Also considering that during that same time, everyone on planet Earth was deciding to make a photo sharing app. I mean, literally a dime a dozen. They were all over the place. And Instagram was really leading that charge. So by early 2012, the writing was certainly on the wall that we had to do something different. Otherwise, we were going to die out like the majority of these other photo sharing apps were doing. And so we decided to really, really hone in on what the different use cases were for the application. So while we started as an app that was really focused on concerts and festivals and things of that nature, we started thinking through these other events. So we did some corporate events, we did some local events with charities, and then we also tested the waters with weddings. So a really interesting fact about our team in the beginning, we were a team by this point of 8 people. It was 7 guys and 1 lady, of which almost all of us were single. So nobody knew anything about weddings. Certainly nobody knew anything about the wedding industry. But we saw that to be a really interesting use case for the platform, thinking about the makeup of a wedding. The average wedding has about 120 people. They may or may not know one another socially, but they all have that common thread or that tie, which is the couple. And people are taking lots of candid content at that type of event. So that was sort of the light bulb moment for us, where we decided, let's go after the specific niche within the photo sharing space. The core competency of the original application remains the same, but we're just applying it to a different market. And it was something that made a lot of sense. And then we started looking at the wedding industry as a whole and realized that there was a massive opportunity because of, first, how big the industry is, and second, it's an industry that's really run by a bunch of big old dinosaur companies, with technology that is years and years behind where everybody else is. And when you think about a wedding, just sort of the makeup of a wedding, it really is one of the most social events that happens in a person's life. And there was no reason why we shouldn't be able to replicate that real life social experience in this digital or online platform. And so we decided to pursue weddings. At the time, we were working out of my basement, true startup style. I will say that it was a nice basement. Looked very much like the room that you're in now. It wasn't like with cobwebs and animals running around in there. And so we basically locked ourselves in that basement for the entire summer of 2012 and brought WedPics to life at the end of August of 2012. We had no idea what we were doing. We just knew that we had this really interesting idea that made sense. One of the things that we also did in preparation for launching this application, again, not really knowing what we were doing, so we decided we needed to figure out a way to showcase WedPics and to tease people about WedPics ahead of launch. And so we said, what better way to do this than let's throw a totally fake wedding.
I like this part.
Let's have all of our friends show up, friends and family. My buddy's band played at the fake wedding. We hosted it at my friend's restaurant downtown Raleigh, and we had a really great time. My best friend and his wife from back home came into town as the couple. She still had her wedding dress, which was readily available, and she still fit in it perfectly. So it was great, and she was excited because this was probably one of the only times that a bride actually gets to wear the dress more than one time for a big event. And so we threw this fake wedding. We created this really awesome video, turned into a commercial for WedPics, and we launched it out to all of our friends on all of our individual social channels. And one of the most interesting things that happened with that experiment was that in the first day we had somewhere around 25,000 views on the video on YouTube. And we got written up by several big tech blogs, and all of a sudden we had a list of a couple thousand people who were signed up to register for WedPics once we launched. So we brought WedPics to market at the end of August of 2012. And when we brought this product to market, originally we were a replacement for the disposable camera. It was a very obvious use case. It still, like I mentioned earlier, it still took that initial concept of the Deja Me app, which allowed people to aggregate or collect all of these individual photos. But we had a problem solution right in front of us. Problem being the disposable camera that you would see at their wedding reception at weddings all around the country, and us offering the solution where you could ditch the disposable camera and just leverage the fact that everybody takes their own candid content on their mobile phones these days. And so we had some pretty interesting success right out of the gate. When we were building out WedPics, one of the challenges that we faced, having spent about 18 months really working on this other application and figuring out all of these different capabilities and this different functionality that we could embed, we had to spend a substantial amount of time cutting all of that away and saying, let's just bring the most simplified, almost like a single purpose application to market, because of the fact that the market was very dated from a technology standpoint, because we didn't know how users would how this would resonate with the users being the couples and the guests. So it was very simplistic, almost as simple as the disposable camera. And we watched how people used it, and then we started to build onto it. And we started to really scale the capabilities of the platform. Another interesting thing that happened very early on, we launched, like I said, end of August. By the end of October, we had our first big PR piece. So we had our local newspaper come out and do this giant story on us. We were the front page of the tech section. Everybody was super excited about that, and it went out on a Monday. On Tuesday at about noon, I have a knock on my door, and it's somebody from the city showing up with an eviction notice for the business. So all of a sudden, things were starting to look up for WedPics and for the company, and we had just come off this wave of our former app, which ultimately didn't work, and now we get our first piece of PR, and now we're getting thrown out of my house. It was a very interesting and wild 24 hours, but we had a massive amount of community outreach, and we landed in a really cool collaborative startup place in downtown Raleigh called HQ Raleigh. And so it's like, it definitely had the silver lining, but we had some pretty crazy, like, oh my God, what do we do? We just got thrown out of my house, the business did, and we had no money to move into an office space, and we didn't know what to do, and we've never known anything except for being in my basement. So it's kind of funny how things like that play out, but it worked out definitely for the better. And we were able to use that PR story for years after that, in terms of just getting people familiar with the product, or people say, oh yeah, you guys were that company that got thrown out of your house, or things like that. So it's kind of cool. And so going back, when we first brought WedPics to market, trying to figure out how do we get brides to adopt this, or how do we get couples to adopt this. Us being a bunch of naive guys, we're thinking, well, if you're getting married, you're going to be spending all of your time on bridal websites and bridal blogs, because that's where bride-to-bes spend all of their time online. Well, we couldn't have been more wrong with that. And that's also where everybody else in the wedding space decides to market. So when we're advertising there, we're just in a sea of hundreds, if not thousands, of other folks who are trying to advertise to the exact same audience. So we took a step back when we realized that wasn't working, and we started thinking, actually, people aren't spending all of their time there. They're still spending their time on their existing social channels like Facebook or Pinterest. Why don't we go after those markets? And so we did that, and we started seeing some incredible results, in particular with Facebook. Being able to leverage the natural virality of that platform and use it to our advantage in terms of getting users, getting people familiar with the product. So it was a really cool opportunity for us. Even to this day, looking at the type of interaction that we have with our posts and how we'll do a post and the comment thread is hundreds of comments of users just tagging other users, line after line after line. So really cool ability for us. And this is where I say that we had, even though we were very much outsiders trying to get into this space, we had a really interesting advantage because we were able to see it from such a unique perspective and say, we don't have to do what everybody else in the space is doing. Let's just figure out a whole new way to acquire these users and move forward that way. To give you an idea of what that acquisition speed looked like, we launched at the end of 2012, so we missed that wedding season. Our first real wedding season was 2013. In March of 2013, every day on average, we acquired about 82 brides. In March of 2014, every day on average, we acquired about 590 brides. And in March 2015, we acquired over 2,000 brides every day. So really just this amazing scale. And thinking about ways that we knew the product was a viral product naturally, but we had to figure out what that tipping point was going to be and how to get there from a paid acquisition to a point where people would start naturally talking about this themselves. When you sort of think about the use case of weddings, a lot of brides at their wedding have also been at other weddings as a guest. So thinking through, if we expose this to enough people, we can start to leverage the guests as a sales force per se to continue to move the product out. And so that's what we've spent the last 2.5 years really focusing heavily on is how to continue to boost that the viral capabilities of the platform, and how to leverage our brides that we're marketing to as salespeople for the product. I oftentimes talk to people about the industry that we're in and say it's not a hard industry to get into. It's an extremely hard industry to scale. I'd say the barrier to entry in the wedding space is quite low compared to other markets. But because of the fact that you're building a product that people are using for what's in most cases the biggest, most important day of their lives, there's no room for error. And so we had to create something that was essentially error-proof. And we had to have a customer support team that we just handled in-house. Myself and a couple of the other guys spent for years, we were behind the customer support and we were answering people 24 hours a day because we had to ensure that in the event something went wrong, which it's going to happen with anything technical, we had to be there to tell them that it was going to be all right and that they could still trust us and that we would fix things. Regardless of what it took for us to fix them. And so we really built a massive trust following from the beginning, which I very much attribute our ability to scale was because of that in many ways, shapes, and forms. So it's been a very interesting ride so far. And looking at the product as well, when we started out going after just the disposable camera and creating something very simplistic, we've continued to increase the functionality of the platform, yet at the same time simplify the platform. That was something that was also imperative to us, is to create something that was very simple to use and something that felt like sort of a combination of other applications that you know just from daily usage. Why that was important was because introducing this new, let's just call it a new technology or new platform into a very dated space, we needed that learning curve to be as low as possible. We didn't want people at the reception to pull out their phone, download WedPics for the first time, and then fumble around trying to use it. We wanted it to feel very natural to them. And so the application feels very much like a hybrid of a Instagram, Pinterest, Facebook, as does the web. So that was another reason why we were able to really accelerate from very early on. And then thinking about who our users were going to be. Unfortunately, we couldn't just target millennials as the only people that were going to be using this because of the makeup of weddings. So you have the teens, the 20s, and then you have exactly the parents and grandparents. So we needed something so simple that everybody could use this without having to ask questions. So there was a lot of variables in play that we had to kind of balance out to figure out what the right way was to build this out. And that's another reason why we took our time in terms of building out the feature sets. You know, we build one thing, and then we add on to it and add on to it, and we would see the results. And as long as the results continue to, as cliche as it sounds, go up and to the right, then everything was good. Perfect example was early on, we weren't seeing as many uploads as we wanted into the album because we only allowed in the beginning one photo upload at a time, much like Instagram. Then we built in the ability to do multi-photo uploads. So now you can upload up to 20 photos at a time.
That's
and
huge.
yeah, we by doing that, we increased our average album by over 3x. So we started watching trends being the majority of our uploads take place on Sunday, but the majority of weddings take place on Saturday. We immediately, another one of these light bulb moments that said people are using WedPics more so after the wedding than during. During the wedding, they'll take a couple quick snapshots and then put their phones away, enjoy the experience. After the fact is when they're sitting down and making uploads, interacting with the content that's being uploaded. And so by doing that, we were able to capitalize on just the user behavior and make it much more advantageous for everybody, ourselves included.
You guys are a team of 22 right now, right? Or have you
Yes.
expanded?
We are 22.
22. How are you doing all this with such a lean team?
We never stop working. We work around the clock. No, it's we have treated this very much like how before I became an entrepreneur and before I jumped into the startup scene, how I sort of envisioned startups working is very much how it works here. We're on pretty much all of the time. I joke saying we work around the clock, but in reality, we really do. Yeah. And we also just work with what we're able to work with. Being based in Raleigh, North Carolina, we don't have the capital access, for example, that we would if we were in San Francisco. And so we're forced to be a smaller, leaner, scrappier team because we don't have another option. But I think that has worked exceptionally well for us in terms of being able to really be a scrappy company. And we've been forced to figure everything out ourselves as opposed to somebody just kind of like handing over the keys and saying, here's how this works, now go do it.
When it comes to having a team that's working around the clock, everyone's going to work in a way that's most right for them. How do you celebrate each of your team members getting their stuff done in the fashion that suits them, even if it's not like the way you do it?
So we try to maintain a really high morale in the office. We every Friday we take the whole team out to lunch or bring lunch in. We've created a really fun office environment here, and we don't do so much individual celebrations, but we do group celebrations. So perfect example, next week we're going to surpass 3 million users. And so we're right now planning something to do with the whole team for next week, because it's a huge milestone for us. Interesting in terms of speed. It took us 18 months to hit our first million. It took us 6 months to hit our second million, 6 months to hit our third million, and our fourth million will probably take about 4 months from now, maybe a little bit less. So as we get into the season, we'll start to scale even faster. But back to the question, we try to just reward as a team and really offer just a fun place for people to work. It's a lot of work. There's certainly days when it's very high stress, but we try to balance that out. Another thing that I personally, as well as my co-founders, have been very keen on is everybody having skin in the game from day one. So everybody having equity in the company. And the people that come here know that, sure, they could probably make more if they went to a corporate gig and did that instead, or did something else. But what they wouldn't have is the ability to really have that piece of the company like they do here, and know that every day the work that they're putting in is going to result in a great payoff at some point for them, in some way. So that's been really important to us, and we've picked assembled the team rather that is excited about that, and that that fuels them.
And one of the things that you and I were discussing before is how important it is for you to stay in North Carolina. You mentioned on Twitter, I think a few months back, that 2 of the interns who worked with you are now starting their own companies, and that was the highlight for you. Tell me more about why that was a highlight.
Yeah, it's really exciting to see that happen, because we've made it farther than I would say any social company has ever made it in this area that we're in. And we oftentimes are so in the thick of it and so deep in our day-to-day activities that we don't ever take a step back to say, that this, look at what we've done. In fact, I just had a phone call right before we started our chat, and on the phone call, somebody was mentioning that they were talking to somebody at Crunchbase who brought up WedPics and was like, "Yeah, if you're in the Raleigh area, that's the company that you want to go meet with."
That's pretty cool.
It's cool, but we just never think about it because we're just in the guts of this thing all of the time. And so hearing stories like that people intern with us and now they have their own startups is amazing to hear that, because we don't really look at this as like we've gotten to the place that we can have spawns creating their own things right now, if you want to call it that. So I think whatever the end game is for WedPics, I'm excited about at some point being able to look back and say, wow, these are all the things that happened. Even just some of the stuff that I mentioned while I was rambling on for the last 20 minutes about the story. There's just so many cool things that happen and opportunities that we've had, and the experiences, the highs, the lows, and just at the end of the day, the fact that we are building something here that hasn't been done, that we've brought in funding that's never been allocated to this type of company, and really, my goal is to remain very bullish about this area and prove that these types of companies can exist here, and really pave the way for other entrepreneurs. I think, in places like the West Coast or the Northeast, that you don't really have those opportunities anymore because you've already had the companies, blaze or create those trails for everybody else. Here, it remains much more open. Like, we have the opportunities to do that, and we're capitalizing on that.
You mentioned fundraising, and it ended up that your round was oversubscribed, but in the beginning it was super hard for you. What was that experience like?
So that has happened now 3 times in a row, as in the last 3 rounds that we've done. Anybody that looks forward to fundraising, I just say best of luck to you, and let's talk about how you feel about it when it's done. That has been my personal role within the company for the last 4 years. So 2.5 with WedPics and 1.5 with the Deja Me app. And it is a brutal process that is, I would say, one of the most trying tasks that you have to do, is to be able to sell your company to somebody and get them to believe in it enough that they will cut you these massive checks. And what I've learned in looking back is there's sort of 3 really interesting types of fundraising that I've been a part of now. So in the beginning, it's selling people on this napkin idea. So when I first came up with this idea for Deja Me, I knew nothing about coding. Nothing existed for the app. There wasn't even a design. It was just, hey, think about this idea and what if we could do this with it? And getting people to invest in that was like this one month fundraising, I would say. The second is, you have a product, people see something tangible now that they can touch, that they can use, but you aren't really showing any types of metrics because it hasn't been brought to market yet. That's sort of the second piece that I have experienced. And then the third piece, which is like our most recent round, we have a real user base, a big user base. We have a ton of metrics and data around it. We have a vision of what this thing's capable of doing, and we have to put some huge milestones in front of us and say, your investment is going to enable us to either hit or surpass these milestones. What do you say? So those have been my experiences so far, but none of them have been easy by any means. And they have been extremely challenging. On more than one instance, we have been within days of being completely broke as a company. I've had this, one time I had to think of a plan B for our entire dev team that was on salary, because I knew that we didn't have enough money to make the next payroll. And literally in the 11th hour and 59th minute, somebody stepped up and said, all right, I'm cutting you guys a check. And then we oversubscribed that round in a matter of like 3 days. But
sounds horrible.
To go from one end of the spectrum to the other, it's crazy. I know you can't see it because we're on the computer video, but this was all jet black when I started, and now it's probably more gray than black exists. But even though it's been as stressful and painful at times as it's been, the reward has been great. And I can say it, I would believe I would speak for a lot of CEOs or folks who are head up the fundraising for their companies. Like, I would think that all of us could agree on the fact that while you are the person who gets named in the articles that you see going out, or that gets to conduct the fun interviews like this, what you have to do on the other side is so stressful, painful.
It's not just the headline.
Exactly. It's not just the glory and I just get to sit back in my office and let everybody do their thing. So it's a lot has been learned from it. And I don't foresee it ending anytime soon. I'm sure that pretty soon I'm going to have to get back on that fundraising train and going out and networking and doing that. But now I have a really killer product that I at least have the confidence.
Helps a little bit.
Right.
It's better than
that I can sell it on that.
So you mentioned that when you meet with, whether it's angel investors, venture capitalists, you have to show them benchmarks. Mm-hmm. And now you're saying, hey, here's our great product, and we're going to surpass or meet these goals if you help us out. What are some of those benchmarks you have in place now that you've reached such scale?
Right. The biggest one is total number of weddings signing up for WedPics. So in the past 2.5 years, 2013, we had 130,000 couples that signed up for WedPics, which was pretty amazing. That was our first wedding season. We didn't know what we were doing, and we got that. Last year, 2014, we had about 275,000 couples that signed up.
What's this year?
This year, our projection is 800,000.
Oh my God. I want to get married just so I can use the app. This is great.
So when we came up with that number of 800,000 and I brought it back to the team, this was a great example of why it's good not to keep any types of weapons in the office, because I probably wouldn't be sitting here speaking to you if that were the case. Everybody's like, you said, how many? What is this number? How are we going to do this? I don't know. We're going to do it. We're going to figure it out. And so, it created a little bit of tension in the office for a couple weeks, but we figured out.
Weapons. You have dogs to protect you.
Exactly. We figured out how to do it. And as I mentioned earlier, with like that scale between March 2013 to March 2015, like we are on track to hit that forecast. But it took a tremendous amount of work on our side. And it was a good experience for us because it forced us to understand so much more detail about the company, marketing strategy, acquisition strategy, like every nook and cranny surrounding the company we had to explore. And so we are on track to hit those numbers this year. But that's one of those just giant benchmarks or milestones that is imperative to not only please the folks who came in, but to get the people on the outside excited about this. The industry, even though the wedding industry in the U.S. is upwards of $100 billion industry, it's an industry that very few people want to touch, especially from a venture capitalist or angel investment standpoint. You rarely see funded companies in here because of how hard it is to scale, as I said previously. And so proving out that we can do something huge in this space is not at all an easy task, but it gets a lot of people excited, showing them what we're able to do and what we have been able to do previously. So that's an interesting thing. But at the end of the day, when you think about the basic or average investor profile, and then having them invest into the wedding space, it's very odd. And especially into a company like us, 22 people, 19 guys, 3 girls, like, you guys are doing what? That kind of thing. It's interesting though.
I'm super confident that you're going to do it, and I can't wait for everyone to watch you guys bring that big 800,000 to life. Thank you so much for being with me today, Justin. How can everyone stay up to date with what you're doing and also download WedPics? Yeah,
so just going on to WedPics.com or searching the Apple App Store or Google Play for WedPics. We actually are available. Those are our 2 core apps, iPhone and Android, but we have a mobile presence that's available on any type of platform that has internet capabilities.
Great. Thank you so much for being with me.
Enjoyed it.